So you guys are all here for MultiCloud, I hope, and how to tune those on Kubernetes and in reference to storage. So my name is Erin Boyd. I'm a senior principal engineer with Red Hat. I primarily work in the storage space, but I'm also currently working on what we call federation, used to call MultiCluster. Storage is a complicated piece of that puzzle because storage doesn't easily move like an app does. You can't kill it and move it to a cluster and restart it. So it's a complicated challenge and an interesting space. And our hope, the three of us, is to get input from you guys. You know, what is the community thinking? What are users wanting? Pretend like you're on Slack. You know, just raise your hand and blurt out what you want to say. Get rid of the formality because, you know, we're really here as a community. We really want your opinions. So I will let them introduce themselves. So Chakri.
Hi, I'm Chakri. I'm the chief architect at Diamanti. So we provide a bare metal HCI on-prem Kubernetes solution for customers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bassam Tabbara. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Upbound, actually based here in Seattle, so welcome to our hometown. We're in the multi-cloud space. We have a set of open source projects. One of them is the Rook project, which is a storage project. And the other one's a project called Crossplane, which is a multi-cloud project. So I think this talk is almost perfect for kind of what we do. So yeah, and if you're, I like what Erin said, pretend you're on a Slack channel, but on the yelling channel on Slack. So please, so I can hear you.
Keep it clean. That's right. All caps, no foul language. Thanks. All right, so we kind of jotted down some of the things we thought you guys would be interested in. And I think, Bassam, you actually said the first thing that was on our list, like what is the difference between multi-cloud and multi-cluster? So you want to take that since?
Sure. There really isn't a crisp definition. I think it's mostly an industry term now. But I'd say multi-cluster probably refers to running multiple Kubernetes clusters and trying to do work either across them or just managing multiple clusters. I think of the word multi-cloud as a little more wider scope than just Kubernetes clusters. It's essentially running across cloud providers, or even potentially maybe even across regions of a cloud provider. So it's just a concept of running workloads or using resources that span clouds, or span regions within a cloud, or even span hybrid boundaries on premises versus cloud. I think all of that is multi-cloud, where, you know, so multi-cluster is Kubernetes specific, I think. Multi-cloud is a little more general.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is you have to look from the use case. I'll tell you one of my experience talking to a financial services architect in New York. So he asked, we were talking and he said that what is a multi-cloud? Just start with the multi-cloud definition, right? So, and we said, okay, let's take the use cases. High availability. Do you really need a multi-cloud for high availability? Then the question came, let's do public and private cloud. When you go to the public cloud, they already provide you high availability. Then do you really need a multi-cloud? Then the question came about vendor lock-in. Then we said, okay, Kubernetes is supposed to provide you the abstraction for vendor lock-in. Then again, why do you need multi-cloud? So then we talked about data. So but you cannot move the data. But then he said, okay, where can I find an app which I want to run in AWS in the morning and Azure in the evening? There's no such app today people are doing. So then we are thinking, okay, what is again a multi-cloud? Then in the end, we said, mostly it's actually on-premises and the cloud. And the use cases for the typical I have heard is, again, cloud bursting. And bursting the data is not easy. So there are the cases where you need a multi-cloud environment and a hybrid cloud where you wanted to actually seamlessly move your application between on-premises and the cloud. And again, if you want to do multi-region and in all other cases, it just falls down to having a multi-cluster rather than having a multi-cloud. Okay.
Perfect. Do you have a question?
We, as a company, I work for DataStax, commercial kind of backer. We have a commercial version of Cassandra. Anyway, so in those discussions, I think that it's also important to bring up the exodus from one cloud to another. And I see a lot of companies not only bursting out or go on-prem and go out to the cloud, but also say AWS is a competitor now. We need to go to someplace else for whatever reason. And so multi-cloud is not a persistent state, I think, oftentimes.
So you nailed it. The other question that came, then you want to make it a data migration. So it's actually then it becomes a data migration. Then I know that people have been doing database migrations, people have been doing data migration for ages now, and that's not something new, right? And that's a problem which is one-off, and people want to tackle it as a one-off rather than trying to build a complete multi-cloud across the clouds. Again, this is what one person's take is, but yeah, if you have multiple other use cases, feel free to use it. But I would say drive it from the use case, and if you want to make it a decision, think through the use cases and then pick a solution for you.
So you're saying you don't feel like you're going to be in a hybrid cloud situation where you feel like Federation just mainly aimed at migrating from one to the next, or? I'm just curious. I mean, we can, as engineers, dream up like, how could we use this? And, you know, we've come up with 10 things, and then we actually want to know what people need.
I've been pushing back against this multi-cloud term for a long time internally to our company, but at the same time, it's becoming more and more demanded from customers. So I can see both sides.
Okay. All right. What do we have on our agenda? Were there any other comments or questions?
I'm almost piggybacking off that last comment. When I was first introduced to Kubernetes, I work at Linode, a cloud provider, and when we were first looking at it, we started talking to consultants about it. We were interested in the hybrid cloud possibilities, and the consultants that we talked to said things like, it's an anti-pattern. To what degree would you say that is maybe was true in the past or is still true compared to other ways that you would approach it?
Well, given I work for Red Hat and we're all about hybrid cloud, I guess I mean, I can't stand up here and say that I feel like it's an anti-pattern. I mean, I think, you know, the reality of avoiding vendor lock-in and being able to move from cloud provider to cloud provider depending on your needs is very attractive, right? And having your base be Kubernetes. So as long as you can conform to that API, you can move where you want and your data's not stuck. I mean, you know, most of the cloud providers rely on the data gravity to keep people where they are because, you know, if we're all perfectly honest, it's expensive to move your data. And so, I mean, I guess what has changed to address the other part of your question? I mean, I think the Federation space has grown substantially. I mean, Federation V1, you know, was trying to tie in to the core Kubernetes to be part of it and realized that that was not going to work long term, you know, and so Federation V2 is more focused on having it be a CRD, so it's expandable. So, you know, what you need depending on your use case is better addressed. So, I mean, multi-cloud or Federation has been talked about for at least 2.5 or 3 years, a very long time. And there are opinions, very strong opinions in this space. And I think that from at least a storage perspective, we at least try to remain somewhat agnostic to it and let Kubernetes do what it does best. Expose the APIs, you know, have it be whatever vendor needs to do what they need to do. And that's kind of the same thing with storage. Is we're a unique part of Kubernetes, I think, because we're, you know, it's tangible. And so I guess that's how I feel it's different.
So just on the anti-pattern, actually, one thing that is interesting to look at is all the major public cloud vendors, or the top, if you say top 3, now actually are doing work across hybrid boundaries. So last week we saw Amazon's Outpost, which is really interesting because it's the first time Amazon has kind of acknowledged that their control plane can actually span to on-premises. Azure's had that for a while. GCP did announce an announcement, similar announcement last summer. So just, you know, if you think about how the people are talking about cloud and cloud being all in on the cloud and cloud first and moving in, yet here are all 3 major public cloud vendors doing hybrid at this point. So just to, you know, to the point of an anti-pattern.
I'd like to add one more confusing point over here is what is hybrid cloud versus multi-cloud? So hybrid cloud typically means you have a single control plane. So if you're GKE on-prem or Azure on-premises and you're running the same thing in the cloud, that's what nowadays the Gartner calls it a hybrid cloud. And if you have a private cloud and you're trying to integrate with something else in the cloud, in the public cloud, then that's actually a multi-cloud, not a hybrid cloud. Okay, thank you.
All right, that actually segues into our next topic, which is private cloud versus public cloud challenges. You want to?
Yep.
Chomping at the bit to take it, so-
Okay, thank you. So when you have a hybrid cloud, you have a universal control plane. But again, the data becomes the problem, and especially when you go to enterprise, you have different kind of storage vendors. So now, how do you migrate your existing storage to make sure it conforms to a hybrid cloud? So actually, there is no perfect solution for it, I'll be honest, but there are many storage vendors who have been working and automating all this process so that like they can fit into the new norm of automated infrastructure, which is getting them closer to the cloud. And then there are other providers who are trying to actually abstract out at a layer on the top and try to have the seamless integration across the planes, across in the public cloud or in the private cloud or in a hybrid cloud. But to be honest, there's no perfect solution as of now yet. It's in works.
And I think it's a challenge unique to Federation because at this point, at least within the V2 API, I mean, it's not storage aware. So, and not all of our storage solutions are really operator based. So then we have the challenge of Federation understanding we're moving from a different cluster, where the storage is located, if it can create new storage in that. I mean, those are huge challenges that still need to be addressed. And of course, Federation just provides a control plane. All this you could do manually, would be completely miserable. But you know, the idea is to create some conformance and best practices to allow that to happen.
Probably another point that's worth talking about is the notion of workload portability. So if you think about the abstractions that Kubernetes provides in terms of pods being able to run anywhere, or persistent volumes that can be deployed in many different forms and different providers, we essentially need more than just pods and storage volumes if we were to go to a world where we have the ability to run workloads both across hybrid boundaries or across clouds or private public. So one of the things that we should think about is how do we create abstractions for things like databases and measure queues and time series databases and all these other things that are stateful today, but are outside of the realm of Kubernetes, right? And that's, essentially a page out of the playbook from Kubernetes, but essentially we need to extend it to go well beyond just containers and storage volumes that they attach to.
And don't forget the afterthought security.
Very nice. Yeah, because then that's storage lifecycle challenges. Yeah. So, not only do you have to manage one storage vendor, you're potentially managing a bunch. So you could have the use case where you have your data across many different cloud providers and you're using their native storage across all of those. So then how do you as an administrator, the challenges of managing all the privacy of the data, the security of the data, the retention, all of those things. So do any of you guys have the answer? I mean, how many of you guys run in a hybrid type cloud structure? How many want to? Okay. Yeah, and is it mainly data driven or app driven or high availability? I'm just curious. Right, and I feel like that's one of the use cases for hybrid is it's sensitive data. You want to scale the app, but you want to leave your data on-prem, no? Right. Right. So then what if you migrate the app in terms of... Oh, okay. So you were saying a legacy app that hasn't been, Not ever going to go. Okay. Okay. I mean, those are all reasonable use cases, right? Yep.
And as one of my other friend put said, data is sacred. So you have to make sure and realize where your data is going. If you have a hybrid cloud kind of solutions, you have to make sure how do you manage the life cycle of your data. If not, like you end up leaking the data in some cases. In some cases, you may not be able to provide the high availability and make your data completely disaster-proof. So you have to take all of your existing storage considerations and slowly, step by step, make sure that you're meeting all of them. Thank you.
Okay, so that goes into kind of the multi-tenancy challenges of storage, and probably leads from the talk before this on security, how we manage multi-tenancy in a storage hybrid situation.
I can try. I'd say the multi-tenancy story is actually fairly early in this community, as we all know. But things like, Firecracker and containers that give you more isolation, this whole blurring the boundaries between VMs all the way down to functions is completely blurry and mushy at this point, which is great. But if we can get to a world where we have things like gvisor and Firecracker and others, then we get some form of isolation across boundaries. But the policy and everything else is just so early at this point where we can get to a world where we can truly say we're running, what's the classic example of Coke and Pepsi running on the same cluster? We are, quite a bit away from that at this point.
You want to add? Chakri? No? All right. Well, we're blowing through this. All right. And then the last one was the evolution of the storage infrastructure for MultiCluster and MultiCloud. And I think we kind of already touched on this. But, honestly, we want to hear some of you guys' challenges and use cases around this space rather than us just preach to you and tell you it's new. So we'll open it up.
Thank you. So I think you mentioned this, what is the use case for multiple clouds other than migration from Cloud A to Cloud B? We have a customer who actually is experimenting with that, running a workload between multiple clouds and leveraging the spot instances to get the lowest compute cost. And as long as the data is shared between those clouds, they can really get some good. So if the data, well, I don't want to get to our discussion, but what we have is basically you can use storage that is adjacent to the cloud and then is available from all of them. Then you don't have any egress at all.
I'm working for University of California, San Diego, and we provide computing resources to scientists, not only in our university, but aggregating a bunch of servers in a bunch of campuses in California and US, and some international. So now we have one huge Kubernetes cluster, and people who don't want to manage their hardware is just giving nodes to us, and we manage it for them. Kubernetes is making it easy. But there are cases when labs have more strict security policies than us, or they want to be in control of what they have in their cluster, but also they might provide some resources to other universities. And now we are, so our project is called PRP, Pacific Research Platform, and we are moving towards NRP, National Research Platform. And we see it as aggregation of Kubernetes clusters. And what we see now in Federation is that it's kind of a layer sitting on top of Kubernetes cluster, watching them from top and controlling. But we rather see it as clusters on the same level talking to each other. So that there is no like main cluster, and each cluster can set their own policies, which others should respect when they run their workloads in it. And same for data, like they need to specify which data they provide access to other clusters for. So it will be really great if we move that direction.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, more of a headless federation instead of kind of the master with the single control plane is definitely desirable. And to your point in the front with, you know, we do like a stretch volume that's available everywhere all the time, and do find that to be, you know, definitely a win for a lot of customers that need that data across the multi-cloud for sure. So I'm glad you brought that up. Anyone else?
Yeah, here.
has
I got the mic.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm too short, I didn't
so
see.
from the multi-cloud question, from a software vendor point of view, you know, we have customers who want to be on AWS, some customers who do not want to be on AWS explicitly, and so the multi-cloud and multi-cluster problem from a software vendor point of view is different than from a customer point of view who just wants on-premise and maybe one cloud, right? So that was just a remark. I want to pick on your brains on workload mobility. So what I'm seeing is, yes, we have these container builds, and now we are seeing that these containers can be run as pods on different managed Kubernetes offerings. But when you get to the support question, how do you get, you know, a stateful, especially a stateful application supported all the way through the stack? That's very mushy. I mean, Red Hat right now proposes, well, you got to build your base image starting with a Red Hat operating system base image. And then underneath, you got to run OpenShift. Otherwise, you're on undefined territory. And then we have other vendors going exactly the opposite direction. So what I want to see, especially also from the CNCF, is a portability statement which goes across all of these different managed Kubernetes offerings, because that's ultimately what makes multi-cluster and multi-cloud really possible.
I'd like to address that. I think it's a very good. First, I'll say I think there is actually a multi-cloud or portability statement in the CNCF charter, if I remember correctly.
Only in a statement, wannabe.
I believe there is something in there. The point you bring up is kind of interesting, because today it's a trade-off between using managed services and portability, right? So there is this trade-off. You could decide to use something like I'll pick on RDS, right? Or you could run something like a MySQL operator in a cluster, right? And there, if you do that, then you might be able to find a company to support it if you run your operator, or you might actually have to do it on your own, right? But essentially, it boils down with all the things that the sophistication of writing operators and how it makes things simpler. You know, we started the Rook project, so we know a lot about operators too. But it's still running software on your own. You're giving yourself an SLA. You're not getting an SLA from, say, an Amazon, right? And so what would be interesting is to kind of redefine the problem and say, can I get portability and still use managed services? That's interesting, right? Because now you don't change the operation model of running in the cloud. You're still using the managed services that are available to you, but you still get some form of portability across them, right? And so at some level, you can argue Kubernetes has done that with pods and persistent volumes. I run a persistent volume. It's EBS in one place. It's Google Persistent Disk in another, right? Can we do a similar thing for more types? And that's more than just volumes, right? And that, I think, is an interesting kind of potentially way to unlock the workload portability problem that you mentioned.
Yeah, it's probably the similarities are in the application binary interface layer.
Completely,
layer.
and there is a fair amount of commonality. The MySQL wire protocol is supported in every cloud. The Postgres wire protocol is supported in every cloud.
Right.
Almost every cloud talks S3.
And last but not least, the Linux kernel is upstream, and everybody's using the same.
That's correct. And so those are, you know, an open interface is a good thing. I mean, we have a bunch of those, and then the trending is that there are more and more open source software that are run even as managed services in clouds. And so we're getting to a point where, you know, if you're doing anything in big data, you're using some piece of open source software. The DataStax is a good example of that. If you're doing anything with databases, or you're doing anything with AI or ML, you're likely mostly dealing with open source software, right? And most of it is actually managed by cloud providers today. So So that's a really interesting and ripe area for us to achieve some kind of portability.
Do you want to add anything? I mean, I hope that is our goal in Kubernetes. I mean, we try at least. I think we try to be very diplomatic about it as much as we can, because that's the whole point. But
And I want to add one more thing about the multi-clusters which you're trying to run. So with the Istio now, maybe it can be extended. So because when you wanted to anyway access the storage across the clusters, so you can actually make it a little bit more intelligent and make sure that you can actually restrict the access to your data. You can actually access to the data layer also, because in the end, you're going to use the same networking paradigms to access the data. Sorry. Oh.
Just really quick on the use cases. I don't know what your visibility is into. I think one assumption that has been made is that all of a company standardized on a single cloud out of the gate, whereas either through different groups kind of doing skunkworks projects or through acquisitions and mergers, you have different preferences, and the ultimate goal maybe 5 years from now is to be all on Azure or something like that. But what do you do when you confront that in terms of a use case? Because it's not really, and it could be that a single, in my case, Cassandra, a single Cassandra cluster may not span multiple clouds, but and that's expensive anyway because of the network traffic in between them. But the one group and a related group, maybe advertising of some kind, uses different clouds and that sort of thing, and then a central management team trying to make sense of that.
Yeah, but to answer that point, right? At how many times you see that they're trying to access the same data everywhere? If you're trying to access the same data, right? We're talking about a problem of the storage. Now, if you have two clusters, they're using, one is used by dev, the other one is by the production. But are you going to share the data between them? If you are sharing, most of the time it's going to be on premises. So you don't need to extend your storage layer across the clouds, except for most of the times it's a hybrid use case. Yep. That's what I was getting to.
So I think your point is actually quite interesting. If people don't really know at this point, I don't think, why they want to be multi-cloud. There are reasons, like you said, they acquire a company and then they're on the other cloud, or they have credits from people in suits showed up and offered them millions of dollars in credits, and that's the CFO now is all excited about Azure, right? And so there are lots of reasons why people have it, but the one thing that as if you're thinking about giving yourself a little more choice, pick platform software that is not specific to a cloud provider. That's really the only normalizing thing you can do at this point. If you use MySQL or if you use Postgres, you're probably good, right? In fact, you can get both of those, using fancy managed services everywhere, right? If you pick something like DynamoDB, you're probably stuck, right? You're gonna need to do some re-engineering if you want to change it, or the CFO is breathing down your neck and saying, "We got $3 million of credits." Those just pick something that has either an open interface or has an open is based on open source software.
I agree with that fully. Open source, right? I know we're at time, so